and welcome back to my channel. I have not done a tag video in such a long time, so I was looking through a bunch of book tags to try and find one to do. I saw Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading do this tag recently, and I thought that one sounded perfect because I do actually DNF quite a lot of books all the time, but I don't talk about them on this channel. So the first question is, do you DNF? In some ways what I do is less DNF and more just try a few pages of the book and see if I gel with the writing style. For me, whether I'm going to enjoy a book is really all about the writing itself. I don't really mind what it's about and who the characters are, but I have to feel like I can trust this author and feel safe in this author's hands, and that always comes down to the actual way that it's written. I don't know whether I could explain exactly what it is about certain people's writing that really speaks to me, but it can happen across all kinds of genres. There's just certain authors that I know I'm instantly going to get along with, and then there are others that, as brilliant as their writing may be, it just isn't for me. It's rare that I'll get more than a few pages into a book and not finish it, but that occasionally happens too. I just get to a point where if I feel like I'm not wanting to actually pick the book up and I'm procrastinating and doing other things rather than reading, then I know it's time to DNF. Sometimes writing can be really good, but then I'll find a book doesn't really go anywhere, starts getting repetitive, or just doesn't do anything interesting. I used to have a separate shelf on my Goodreads where I could list all the books that I didn't finish, but I deleted that recently because it just really annoyed me looking at books that I didn't particularly like. So now if I have put a book on Goodreads and I don't finish it, I'll just delete it off my Goodreads account. So question 2 is, if you DNF a book, does it count towards books that you read for that month? No, definitely not. If I don't finish a book, it doesn't count towards any kind of goal. Question 4 is, what popular book have you DNF'd? And because I don't keep lists of them, this was really hard to remember an answer for, but I do remember I tried to read Atonement by Ian McEwan ages and ages ago. I think I must have been about 17 or 18. It was at a time when I was reading a bunch of my mum's books that she owns, because I was starting to get into actual adult fiction rather than just classics and young adult, and she loves a lot of Ian McEwan's novels, so I thought I'd start off with the most famous one, Atonement, but I did not get along with it at all. I really enjoyed the beginning part with the character Bryony, but then found all the other characters just super annoying, so I think I gave up after only about maybe 30 pages or so. But it is one of those books I'm kind of curious to go back and see if maybe I was just not the right age to read it. I have seen the film version and I didn't enjoy that either, so it could be that that story is just not for me. And Ian McEwan's books have been really hit and miss for me as well. I adore On Chesil Beach, it's one of my favorite books ever, but then another book I read by him called Amsterdam I absolutely hated, so he's a really interesting author in that way. Number 5 is, what book do you wish you had DNF'd? So for this question, I could say something like Anna Karenina, which took me over a year to read, and I did not enjoy most of the reading experience of that book. Yet I very rarely regret reading a classic, because there's usually a reason that they are a classic novel, and even if I don't love it, I think there's still value in reading something that has such a big part of our literary history and culture. So going through my Goodreads, there were a few books that really stood out to me that I read sort of 2 or 3 years ago. So some of the books I picked were things like The Green Road by Anne Enright, From a Low and Quiet Sea by Zonal Ryan, The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart by Holly Ringland, My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout, and also Station 11 by Elizabeth St. John Mandel. And these are all literary fiction novels that were kind of big on BookTube at the time, or just big amongst literary fiction circles, and it's very easy to get caught up in the hype and to want to join in with reading these books. And definitely some books that I read during that time that were part of that whole literary fiction thing were really amazing, and I'm so glad that I discovered them through BookTube and through the hype about them. But there are equally just as many that I'd almost forgotten I'd read because they had so little impact on me, or I just really didn't enjoy them that much. And what all these books have in common, I think, if I remember correctly, is a kind of self-serious glumness to them and to the way that they're written. I think a lot of literary fiction falls into the trap of being very self-serious, often because it is about very serious topics, or even when it's not, when it's just about kind of middle-class people in very privileged positions. And it's not necessarily about the characters taking their situation seriously, it's about the way that it's written. And I think that, for me anyway, a style of writing needs to have a sense of humor about itself. It doesn't have to be laugh out loud funny, but sometimes you can just tell in an author's voice that they are self-aware and aware that what they are doing is not necessarily the most crucial thing in the entire world. And it kind of comes back to that whole thing of what makes something literary fiction as opposed to just a general fiction. Why are these particular books given a certain level of status over others? But yeah, anyway, these are among a whole bunch of books that I just found quite dull and boring and kind of wish I had DNF'd them rather than struggling through, because at the time I felt that if I had added it to my Goodreads, I had to finish it, which I now have completely gotten over. So question 6 is, do you ever reattempt to read a DNF? I have only done this once, and it was for The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn. I DNF'd it originally because, again, the writing style was not engaging me. I was kind of hoping for, you know, another Gone Girl, I guess, as everyone else was, and was not getting that at all. But I tried it again because for work I was going to write this article with my manager about different types of reading. So she read it via audiobook and I read it via paperback from the library, and we were just going to write a little article comparing the two different ways of reading and the pros and cons of that, which we actually never got around to writing because COVID happened and it kind of prevented the publication it was going to go into from getting published. So that's been changed to November. I don't know whether we're going to continue with that article, especially as it was going to coincide with the film coming out, and now who knows when that film's coming out. So anyway, that actually was a really successful reattempt at reading because I did actually quite enjoy it in the end. I still think it's not particularly well written or very good novel, but I did have a bit of fun reading from a genre that I don't normally pick up. Question 7 is, what do you do with books you DNF? So most of the books I get are from the library, so that's very easy. I just take them straight back to the library. If I DNF any books I bought, they're usually books that I have purchased from an op shop, so I will just return them straight to the op shop. And even if they're not, if they're birthday presents, or very rarely will I buy a brand new book that I don't want to keep, that again will just go straight to the op shop. I can't be bothered trying to like go sell it somewhere, so I like donating it to an op shop in the hope that someone like me who enjoys op shopping for books will come across it and it'll find a nice new home to live in. So that does kind of lead into the last question, which is, do you choose more or less risky titles because of your stance on DNFing? I'd say I will try reading pretty much anything that takes my fancy if it's in the library, because there are no stakes to getting a book from the library apart from, I guess, the effort of going to the library to pick it up and then return it. But I will often just request a bunch of books, and sometimes I will, after I pick them up, just do the sort of 1 or 2 page read and decide I don't want to read them. But it really doesn't matter because it's completely free and I'll just take it straight back. I enjoy a trip to the library regardless of whether I get anything to read out of it, to be honest. And the same with op shop books. If the 1 or 2 page reading method works and I'm intrigued by a book at the op shop, I will buy it because they're usually only $1 or $2. Occasionally that's happened and I've not finished the book and donated it back again, but all it's cost me is a couple of dollars to a charity. And I visit op shops so regularly that I'm never going out of my way when I want to donate them back again. If I was in a situation where I could only buy new books and that was my only access to new books, then I definitely would be less risky in my choices because of my stance on DNFing. When I buy a book brand new, I want to be absolutely sure that it's something that will stay on my shelf forever. So usually those are only books that I have already read and know that I love. Though I guess if that was my only way to read new books, maybe I would branch out a bit and take a chance on them, because thinking about that now, if I lost access to my library and the op shops as well, I would be extremely sad because I would have no source of new novels to read. I probably would end up just rereading the same books over and over again like I used to do when I was a kid. So that's the end of the questions. All in all, I would say I'm a huge believer in DNFing. I don't think anyone should be forcing themselves to read a book that they're not enjoying, regardless of whether it's a classic or whether it's really popular right now. There's just so many books to read and so little time to read them in that I absolutely cannot afford to be wasting time on something that I am not 100% enjoying. Though I do understand the other argument that you might be missing out on ideas and types of writing that you're not used to, and I do wonder whether because I'm only reading things that appeal to me, I'm only reading the same sorts of books. I hope not. I think looking through my Goodreads and seeing what I have read over the last few years, I think it has been relatively varied. It probably could be more varied, but again, there's so little time. If I was a full-time booktuber and this was my job, I would have the time to worry about all these things, but to be honest, because this is a hobby, I'm pretty happy with my decision to only read things that very much appeal to me. I'll tag a few people below, but no pressure to do this at all, only if you feel like it. And even if I don't tag you, absolutely feel free to do the tag. Tell me your views on DNFing in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Bye!